Hi, my name is Dr. Ruth Cangialosi. I'm a doctorate prepared nurse and I'm board certified in psychiatric nursing. From the fields around me, you probably can't tell that I currently live just outside of Chicago with my husband and one of our adult children. You know, I have a story to tell, and I've shared bits and pieces of this story with people over time, but I feel like it's a good moment to get this story out, to kind of help people know that we have a heavenly hope. And even though today may sting and hurt, and in heaven we will be made new. And let me tell you how I know that. I have a degree for full disclosure, I have a degree from Moody Bible Institute in Christian education and a minor in Bible. I want you to know that that degree really did not do anything for me once I became 28 years old. My husband and I had been married for about 7 or 8 years, and I had just given birth to our 4th child. We had 4 kids in about 5.5 years, 3 girls and a boy. When I gave birth to our 4th child, I had a very precipitous labor, and I only pushed once. There was a lady dressed in a blue denim dress that came down to her knees, and I had a white shirt on, and she had a red belt, I believe it was, around her waist. And she looked over at me and she said, "Ruth, only push once or you'll be going home. Your family needs you." So the doctor says, "Okay, the contractions are starting. You need to start pushing." And I said, "No, I'm not going to push more than once because that lady told me to." And him and my husband were like, "What lady? We're the only 2 people in the delivery room with you." I described the woman that was standing underneath the TV, and I could see her with such a beautiful and peaceful smile. But they couldn't see her. I pushed once, and I delivered our son. 3 weeks later, the migraines that had been plaguing me for the past couple years, but particularly while I was pregnant with him, became unbearable. I went to a neurologist who I didn't really have a follow-up appointment with, and somehow got through the back door, or the side door, and walked literally to his office. And I said, "I had a dream that I died, and I told my husband in that dream to hold you responsible because something is wrong with my brain." Dr. Green was a very nice man, and he kind of pushed away from his desk and he said, "Well, we had a cancellation for an MRI, but first let's try giving you some extra oxygen." So they did that, and I felt worse. So they did the MRI. And there my husband waited with our 3-week-old son in his carrier, waiting for Mom to nurse him. And I look up and there's 50 white coats, you know, those lovely long white coats that doctors wear, all shaking their heads like this. I knew something was wrong. They had found on my carotid artery an aneurysm, which is like a balloon, that was the size of a golf ball, an additional aneurysm that was the size of a marble a little further down. Mind you, most people die from an aneurysm within seconds of it rupturing, and anything over 3 millimeters is considered life-threatening. I had a 3 millimeter and a 4 centimeter size aneurysm, and I had just given birth. So it was a Thursday. They had to call in a special doctor from another country, I believe, and find a hospital for him to do the surgery. They tried to do some things other than opening up my brain, but the aneurysm was just too great for them, and I actually passed away. I remember being jump-started, and as I looked down at the table, I thought, wow, I have 4 children. I didn't expect to be in this situation right now. And I looked to my right, I looked to my left, and there was the lady from the delivery room, the one that had stood under the TV. And she said, "Don't worry, Ruth, you're gonna make it." Well, the next thing I know, I heard the saw. If you've ever heard saw cutting through bone, it's a very gross noise. And I heard that as they cut into my brain. I remember at one point looking over at a table and wondering what something was that was sitting on a table. Mind you, I was under full anesthesia. And as I wondered what it was, a resident doctor said, "Hey, this is her skull. Is it going to be okay here? Will it still adhere, or do we need to preserve it like in saline?" I don't remember what the answer was, but I do have an incredibly bumpy connection between that skull that they cut out and the skull that they left behind that they had to reconnect it to. Minutes became hours, but I lost track of time as I went in and out of consciousness, and sometimes I'd be like at the top of the ceiling looking down on my body and feeling bad for myself. Sometimes I would be with the lady who had stood underneath the TV in the room when I was delivering Pietro, and she would just bring me such comfort and say, "It's okay, honey. God's got you." At one point, she asked me if I wanted to go see a few of the children that I had miscarried, actually all of them, and my dear grandma, who I was super close to. And she had passed away in 1992. I told her that before we left to go see them, I wanted to see my husband. All of a sudden, there were multiple people up at the ceiling with me discussing whether or not I should see my husband. But they took me to him. And he was standing with his head like this against a window, looking out over downtown Detroit. And the room was empty. And it had those 70s kind of colored, green and yellow, very uncomfortable, almost like schoolroom chairs that were bolted to the floor, and they were all in a row. And a big African-American man came in, and he had sweat dripping from his temples, and his name tag wasn't on because I did try to look for that. And he was mopping, and he said to my husband, "Oh, surgery's closed. What are you still doing here?" And he said, "My wife is still in surgery." And so that man, the housekeeper, went. And I remember he came back and told my husband, "Yes, the surgery was only supposed to take 6 hours. We're at 12 hours right now, and the doctor said it could be another 6. And there stood my husband, alone. I told whoever I was with, I said, "I can't leave my husband like this. He is alone. And somebody needs to be with him and comfort him. I can't be there because I'm over there, but yet I'm also up here looking down on him." And instantly, when I said, "God, please comfort my husband, don't leave him alone," you could feel the wings of the angels. You could feel their presence. It was like thick, but peaceful and beautiful. And there they were, above him, but yet with their arms around him. And I remember he leaned his head like he was resting his head on one of their shoulders. and they literally wiped a tear from his eye. So I felt it was okay to go, knowing that he was in very good care. Things got very, very bright. I saw colors that I cannot even explain to you. We think that like daffodils are yellow and their leaves are green, but there's actually blue in their leaves, and I saw that blue. I saw, I can't describe the colors that I saw. And the instantaneous, from the ceiling of that waiting room to an incredibly bright, warm, quiet, but yet there was music, but not like we know music. It was, there is no way to describe it. It was music that spoke to your soul. The lady who had stood underneath the TV in the delivery room pointed over to a hill, and she said, "Look over there." And I looked over there, and there was running 6 little children with my grandma. One of them we had named Hazel. My grandma's name was Hazel. And I remember my grandma calling out to her, "Hazel, Hazel, look, it's your mom." All the children looked up, and I recognized one of our daughters was a twin, and I lost the twin, and I recognized one of those children immediately as Deanna's twin. And I just saw them running and playing on this green hill that my grandma was running up. Let's see, she was born in 1901. She passed away in 1992. And she was running up a hill effortless, surrounded by light and music. When my grandma saw me, she's like, "Sweetheart, go back. I'll take care of the kids till you get here. We're having a wonderful time." That's something my grandma used to say all the time. We're having a wonderful time. When she said to go back, I looked towards the woman who had been underneath the TV in the delivery room. And I said, "Well, should we go back?" And so I have to admit, this part of my memory gets a little foggy. I don't remember if she pointed or if I gazed in another direction myself. It was some type of a noise, and I really do think it was a beeping noise of a machine. It kind of like startled me. And what I was looking at, instead of it being as green and luscious as this, it started to become faded. And like I couldn't reach into it anymore. Like a thin veil, like that a bride would wear at a wedding, had now been dropped. We were walking somewhere away from the interaction with my grandma and the children that we had lost. And a gentleman walks by, and he says to me, "I'm so glad you find my writing inspirational." And I said, "Well, you're either Moses or Paul." And he said, "I'm Paul." And I was like, wow, I think I just met the Apostle Paul. And the beeping in the background started getting annoying. And I closed my eyes but for a second. And there were the white coats standing over me as I once again looked up from the gurney. And they said, "She's gonna make it. She's gonna make it." I remember one of them said, I think she just had a tear run down her cheek. Somebody else said, oh, she's under anesthesia, she can't be crying. But I was. I wanted to make it, but the smells of that operating room and the noise and the pain, oh, and the lack of color compared to the colors I had just seen, it actually made it a little hard for me to keep fighting. I looked over to my left and I saw the defibrillators and instinctively knew that they had to have used them once again to bring me back. 16 or 18 hours later, my 6-hour surgery was done. My 6 staples had grown into 88 staples across my head, where they cut from here all the way down past my ear, took a big section of my brain out, or my skull, moved my brain around, used a temporal artery and stitched it to a carotid artery, which brought my blood pressure down to like 40/20. And it was during those times that I got to see Jesus. I got to see heaven. I got to see that this isn't all. Oh, this is just the beginning. Since my surgery, I went through some times where I was very angry at God. My husband and I had been serving him in a missions type organization when they found the aneurysm, and the amount of pain after that surgery was enough to make anybody just want to give up. And it was because of one nurse who encouraged me to keep fighting that I did. The anger that I had towards God afterwards kind of surprised me, because I had been given something that most people hadn't been given. I had gotten to see what comes next. But living with the migraines that I was living with just became difficult. And here we are, 23 years post-surgery, 23 years with a migraine, and on this very day last year, I held my mom in my arms and I helped her walk from this earth to heaven. And I was able to tell her what it was going to be like. And she took that last breath in my arms on July 4th of last year. And so I said, this year, I'm going to tell my story. My dad's also passed away. He's been gone 7 years. I was always a daddy's girl. My dad died teaching us what our faith meant. He died singing hymns and praising Jesus and telling us how beautiful heaven was, and telling us of glorious music that he could hear anytime he fell asleep, and of colors and smells and aromas. And he'd wake up and he'd say, oh, this isn't heaven anymore, I want to go back. And we knew he would, as the cancer was wreaking havoc on his body. But I was thinking about it today. I actually know where my parents are. I've seen it. And last year, I held my mom as she made that transition from this earth to eternity. Despite the ongoing headaches and the frustrations with that, I'm here, and I survived. And I tasted heaven. And I just want you to know, if there's any doubt in your mind about what's to come, turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look whole in his wonderful face. and the things of earth will grow faintly dim in the light of His glory and grace. I'm here only by the grace of God. To God be the glory. Amen.